Before we begin, settle into a place that feels easy and unhurried. Let your shoulders soften, let your breathing slow, and allow your thoughts to drift as gently as distant clouds. This is a story told at the pace of starlight, meant for quiet hours and wandering minds, so if your eyes grow heavy along the way, that is perfectly all right. The universe is patient, and it does not mind if you listen with your dreams. Far beyond the familiar glow of the sun, past the slow dance of planets and the silent drift of comets, there exists a boundary that for most of human history lived only in imagination. Astronomers once pictured it as a gradual fading, a gentle thinning of sunlight until nothing remained but darkness. It seemed reasonable to assume that our solar neighbourhood would simply dissolve into the vastness of the galaxy, the way a shoreline dissolves into mist, and for decades that was the expectation. A quiet ending, a soft edge, a place where nothing remarkable happened at all. But the universe has a habit of keeping its most surprising truths in the places we assume are empty. At the very outskirts of our sun's influence, where its warmth has thinned to a memory and its gravity loosens its gentle hold, something unexpected waits. Not silence, not stillness, but motion, energy and heat beyond anything scientists once predicted. A region so energetic that, by the language of physics, it burns at tens of thousands of degrees. A boundary not of calm fading, but of invisible fire. It sounds dramatic when spoken aloud, and yet the reality is strangely peaceful. Because this fire does not flicker like flame, and it does not roar. It exists as motion rather than light, as particles gliding through darkness with astonishing speed. If you were somehow there, drifting beside that distant threshold, you would see nothing at all. No blaze, no glow, only blackness and stars. The heat would be measurable but not felt. The energy would be real, but almost ghost-like. It is a reminder that in space, even extremes can be quiet. For a long time, this distant border remained theoretical, a line drawn in equations and sketches rather than observed directly. Scientists knew the sun was not just a lamp in the sky, but a constant fountain of particles, a steady wind flowing outward in all directions. This solar wind travels far beyond the planets, carrying with it the sun's magnetic field, stretching it outward into space like invisible threads. Together they form a vast bubble around our star, an immense sphere that encloses everything we call home. Inside that bubble, the environment is shaped by the sun. Outside it, the galaxy takes over. The question that lingered, for generations, was simple and profound. Where exactly is that boundary? Where does the sun's domain truly end? It is the kind of question that belongs to campfires and childhood nights. The sort that arises when someone looks up and wonders where here stops and there begins. Humans have always asked it in one form or another. Where is the edge of the forest? Where does the ocean finish? Where does the sky end? Each time we answer, we discover that the edge is farther away than we thought. To find the boundary of our solar system, imagination was not enough. Telescopes could not see it. Equations could only estimate it. The only way to know was to send something outward, something patient and enduring, something willing to travel for decades through the cold and the dark. It would need to survive far longer than its builders expected, and it would need to keep whispering back across unimaginable distances, telling us what it found. Such a messenger would have to be small, resilient, and extraordinarily determined, and somehow, against all reasonable expectations, humanity had already built it. Long ago, in an era of slide rules and room-sized computers, engineers assembled 2 modest spacecraft and sent them away from Earth. They were never meant to journey forever. They were designed for a handful of years, perhaps a little longer if fortune was kind. No one imagined they would still be travelling nearly half a century later. No one truly believed they would reach the invisible frontier, where our sun's influence gives way to the wider galaxy. Yet year after year they continued. They passed the orbits of planets, then the distant debris fields beyond them, then the scattered remnants of ancient formation. They moved steadily outward, carried by momentum and silence, growing farther from home with every second. Signals travelling at the fastest speed possible still needed hours to reach them. Commands became conversations measured not in moments, but in days. The spacecraft drifted on, unhurried and faithful like bottles set afloat on a cosmic sea. and then, after decades of travel, one of them arrived. When it finally crossed that long-imagined boundary, it did not find the gentle fading scientists expected. It found turbulence, it found structure, it found energy. Instruments recorded particles racing with astonishing speed, temperatures soaring far beyond predictions, magnetic fields twisting in ways theory had not foreseen. The edge of our solar system was not quiet at all. It was alive with motion, a place where forces from our sun and forces from the galaxy pressed against one another in a delicate, invisible balance. It was, in its own silent way, a frontier of fire. You might imagine such a discovery arriving with celebration and thunder, but in truth it came quietly, hidden in streams of data, lines of numbers transmitted across billions of kilometers. Scientists studied them patiently, checking and rechecking, making sure the instruments were not mistaken. Only slowly did the realization settle in. The boundary of our cosmic home was stranger than anyone had imagined. And perhaps as you rest and listen, you can feel the gentle wonder of that realization. That even now, at the farthest edge of sunlight's reach, there are still surprises waiting. That the universe, vast and unhurried, always keeps another mystery just beyond the horizon. The story of how those small machines came to travel so far, and why they were ever sent at all, begins not at the edge of space, but decades earlier, on a warm morning beside the ocean, when human hands prepared to launch them toward the unknown. The morning they began their journey did not feel like the beginning of forever. It felt like any other coastal morning, warm air resting gently on the ground, a slow drift of clouds overhead, the ocean breathing in long, patient tides nearby. On a launch pad beside that shoreline stood a slender rocket, quiet for the moment, carrying within it a small machine no larger than a modest car. It did not look like something destined for eternity. It looked delicate, almost ordinary, a collection of metal panels and antennae and instruments carefully fastened together by human hands that could not possibly follow where it was about to go. It helps sometimes to remember that great journeys often begin in stillness. The engineers who built this traveller did not expect it to wander for decades. They imagined a mission measured in years, perhaps 5 if fortune allowed, long enough to visit a few distant planets and send back photographs that would quietly expand the borders of human knowledge. They designed it with care, of course, but not with immortality in mind. And yet, even then, there was a kind of quiet hope woven into its structure, the same hope that lives inside any craft launched toward the unknown, the hope that it might last just a little longer than planned, drift a little farther than predicted, whisper a few more secrets before its voice faded. The machine itself was a study in patience and restraint. Its body formed a many-sided shell, each compartment holding a different task like rooms in a small travelling house. One chamber managed communication, another orientation, another stored data, another listened for particles drifting through space. Everything had its place, and nothing was hurried. Its large white dish, curved like a shallow bowl, faced always toward Earth, as if remembering where it had come from. That dish would become its voice, carrying faint signals across distances so vast they softened the imagination. Inside, instead of engines that roared or turbines that spun, it carried something quieter, a power source that did not burn fuel, but simply rested and changed slowly over time, small pieces of a rare element, sealed safely within protective layers, released warmth as they aged, and that gentle warmth became electricity. No moving parts, no flicker of flame, only a steady fading glow, like embers that can last for decades if left undisturbed. It was not a dramatic kind of power, it was a patient one. Patience, after all, is the true fuel of deep space. Long before the rocket ever touched the sky, a discovery had made the mission possible. An engineer studying planetary paths noticed a rare alignment forming in the outer solar system, a graceful arrangement that happens only once in many human lifetimes. The giant planets would soon line up in such a way that a spacecraft could visit them one after another, borrowing a little momentum from each world's gravity, the way a stone skipping across water gains distance with every touch. With careful timing, a single journey could pass from one distant giant to the next, travelling farther than any probe before it without carrying enormous amounts of fuel. It was a fleeting doorway through the heavens, and it would not remain open for long. Plans were drawn, revised, simplified, and revised again. Ambitions rose like tides and then receded under practical concerns. In the end, what remained was modest but remarkable. 2 identical travellers, launched weeks apart, each entrusted with a path through the outer darkness. They were not grand monuments of machinery. By modern standards, their computers were astonishingly simple, their memory smaller than that of devices now forgotten in drawers. And yet simplicity can be a form of strength. With fewer parts to fail, fewer complexities to unravel, they possessed a quiet resilience. When the day finally came, engines ignited and the rocket lifted slowly from the Earth, carrying its passenger upward through cloud and blue sky into the black beyond. The sound faded quickly, the flame vanished, and then there was only motion. The spacecraft drifted outward, leaving behind the warmth of sunlight reflected from oceans and the distant shimmer of continents. Soon, Earth itself became just another point of light, indistinguishable from the stars around it. The traveller did not turn to look back. It simply continued, guided by mathematics, by gravity, by the gentle certainty of its path. If you imagine it now, gliding in silence, it does not feel like a machine so much as a message. Something sent ahead, not knowing exactly what it will find, only trusting that the journey matters. And perhaps that is why its story feels strangely human, because it carries with it the same quiet determination that people have always carried when stepping beyond familiar shores. As it moved deeper into the dark, the sunlight thinned, the warmth faded, and the vast distances between worlds began to stretch like calm oceans without wind. Yet the small traveller did not hurry. It had nowhere else to be. It simply followed its course, patient as stone, steady as tide. And ahead of it, waiting in the slow unfolding of years, were the great distant planets themselves, turning silently in their cold domains, ready to greet a visitor that had come farther than any messenger before. The small traveller drifted onward, and the darkness around it did not feel empty so much as vast, like a calm ocean whose surface never ripples. Time out there moved differently than it does on Earth. Minutes stretched into hours, hours into days, and days into months, until the passing of years felt less like a march and more like a slow tide, rising so gradually that one scarcely notices the shoreline shifting. The spacecraft did not hurry. It did not need to. Its path had been written long before its launch, traced in invisible curves shaped by gravity itself, and all it had to do was follow. Ahead, the first of the distant giants waited. Jupiter does not appear suddenly. From afar it begins as a bright star that does not twinkle, steady and patient, growing almost imperceptibly night after night. As the traveller approached, that point of light widened into a sphere wrapped in pale bands and rust-coloured swirls, a world so large that more than 1,000 Earths could rest within it and still leave room to spare. Even from millions of kilometres away, its presence felt immense, like a mountain glimpsed through morning mist, its scale understood not by detail, but by quiet intuition. When the spacecraft finally slipped close enough to see clearly, it revealed a place alive with motion. Clouds moved in long rivers around the planet's waste, storms turned slowly like great wheels, and deep within one vast crimson oval, a tempest older than human history continued its endless turning. Nothing about Jupiter seemed rushed. Even its violence was patient, unfolding over centuries rather than moments. It was a reminder that in the grander parts of the cosmos, power often moves slowly, the way glaciers carve valleys without sound. Around that giant world circled moons, each one a story written in stone and ice. One of them, small and golden, surprised the watchers on Earth. Its surface was not quiet or ancient as expected, but restless, dotted with plumes that rose high above its horizon, drifting like ghostly fountains before falling again. Another moon shone pale and smooth, its icy crust traced with long cracks, as though something beneath had shifted and breathed. There were others too, some dark and scarred, some bright and reflective, each turning in silence, each carrying secrets that would only be glimpsed for a moment as the traveller passed. And pass it did, for it could not linger. Gravity, gentle yet insistent, curved its path and sent it onward. the way a river current guides a drifting leaf without ever touching it. The spacecraft borrowed a little speed from Jupiter as it went, a graceful exchange that cost the giant planet nothing, yet gave the traveller momentum for the next stretch of its voyage. It was a dance older than language, this trading of motion, written into the laws that shape all things. Beyond Jupiter lay another world, ringed and luminous, waiting in the deeper dark. Saturn greeted the traveller not with storms, but with elegance. Its rings appeared first, thin lines of light suspended in blackness, delicate as frost patterns on glass. Only slowly did they widen into a vast disk encircling the planet, made not of solid bands but of countless particles moving together, each fragment tracing its own path while remaining part of a greater design. Seen from afar, they resembled a calm lake frozen in perfect symmetry. Seen closely, they revealed motion everywhere, a quiet choreography of ice and stone. There was something soothing in that sight, something almost musical. The rings did not clash or collide, they flowed. Even the small moons hidden within them seemed to guide their shapes, carving narrow gaps and weaving subtle waves through the shining bands. It was a system built not from stillness but from balance, each piece influencing the others, all of it turning together in a harmony that required no conductor. The traveller slipped past this ringed world as well, gathering another gentle push from its gravity, another silent gift of speed. And as it moved on, climbing gradually above the flat plane where most planets wander, it left behind the familiar architecture of the solar system. The bright giants receded, their colours fading into distant points, their intricate storms and rings dissolving into simple light. The spacecraft did not turn to watch them go. It continued forward, faithful to its course, carrying with it the memory of what it had seen. By then, the sunlight had grown thinner, its warmth reduced to a faint suggestion. The darkness ahead was deeper, richer, like water far below the surface where no wave can reach. Yet the traveller remained steady, guided by quiet signals from home, its small instrument still listening, still measuring, still patient. It had crossed the realms of the great planets, and now it was entering a region few had ever imagined in detail, a place where distances widen and silence deepens. If you find your thoughts slowing as you picture it drifting there, that is perfectly natural. The journey itself is slow, and it invites the mind to match its pace. There is no need to hurry, the stars are in no rush, and neither is this story. Far ahead, beyond where even the faint glow of the sun seems only another star among many, lay the invisible frontier we spoke of earlier, the boundary where the influence of our star softens and the wider galaxy begins to speak. The traveller was moving toward it even now, carried by momentum, by patience, by the quiet persistence of a path set long ago. And as it went, the space around it began, ever so subtly, to change. The change did not arrive like a wave striking shore. It came the way night arrives in a quiet valley, so gradually that no single moment can be named as the turning point. The traveller continued outward through the deepening dark, and the space around it began to feel different, not in brightness or colour, for those remained the same endless black, but in texture, in character, in the invisible currents that flowed past its instruments like unseen tides. For a long time it had been moving through a region shaped almost entirely by the sun. Even so far away, our star was still quietly present, sending out its steady wind of particles, a constant outward breath that stretched across billions of kilometres. This solar wind was not wind in the earthly sense. It made no sound, stirred no dust, rustled no leaves, yet it flowed all the same, carrying with it a faint magnetic whisper, an imprint of the sun's own hidden rhythms. Everything within that vast invisible bubble belonged in a sense to the sun's domain, as though the star had extended a translucent shoreline around itself. But like all shores, this one had an edge. As the traveller pressed onward, it approached a region where that solar breath began to falter. The outward flow that had once streamed freely now slowed, as if meeting resistance from something equally vast pressing back from the other side. It's easy to imagine it as two ocean currents meeting in slow motion, neither violent nor abrupt, just a gradual thickening where opposing motions mingle. Instruments aboard the small machine detected the shift before anyone on Earth could sense it. The particles it counted no longer behaved the same way. Their speed changed, their temperature rose. The quiet wind of the sun was beginning to stumble. This place, though invisible, had structure. First came a boundary where the solar wind, once swift and confident, suddenly slowed, as if it had crossed from open water into a dense fog. Beyond that lay a region of turbulence, a vast and restless expanse where solar particles and interstellar particles drifted together, mingling like currents of warm and cold water meeting beneath a moonlit surface. Here, directions blurred, magnetic fields tangled. Motion became unpredictable, not chaotic in a violent sense, but complex, layered, textured in ways that equations alone had never fully captured. The traveller entered this realm without ceremony. There was no gate, no line drawn across the dark. Only data, quietly accumulating, whispering back to Earth that something in the environment had changed. Scientists, patient as stone, studied the signals and realized that the spacecraft had crossed into a region no instrument had ever measured before. It was moving through a frontier that had existed for billions of years, yet had never been touched by anything built by human hands. You might picture it gliding there now, small and steady, surrounded by nothing visible at all, and yet immersed in a sea of motion too subtle for eyes to see. It did not feel the crossing. It did not shudder or sway. It simply continued, as it always had, listening. As months and years passed, the signs grew stronger. The influence of the sun weakened further, like the fading warmth of a fire when one steps slowly away from it across a wide field. At the same time, faint signals from beyond began to grow more noticeable. Particles born in distant stellar explosions, travellers themselves from far corners of the galaxy, reached the spacecraft in greater numbers. They had always existed, these cosmic wanderers, but inside the sun's protective bubble many of them had been deflected. Now more of them slipped through, arriving like distant messengers from places the traveller would never see. And then, one day, the instruments recorded a transition that was unmistakable. The balance shifted. The solar particles that had accompanied the spacecraft for its entire journey fell suddenly quiet, as though a familiar voice had faded from a conversation. In their place came the steady presence of particles that belonged not to our star, but to the vast region between stars. The traveller had crossed the outermost boundary of the sun's influence. It had stepped beyond the shoreline. There was no flash of light to mark the moment. No sound, only the calm recognition, transmitted across unimaginable distance, that something built on Earth was now moving through interstellar space. Even that phrase sounds grander than the experience itself. Interstellar space is not a crowded place. It is thinner than the faintest vacuum ever made in a laboratory, quieter than any silence known on Earth. And yet it is not nothing. It is a gentle medium, a slow ocean of scattered atoms and wandering magnetic fields, shaped by ancient events and distant stars. The traveller now floated within it, carried along as if by a current too subtle to feel. If your thoughts drift as you imagine this crossing, that is only natural. It is a story of patience more than motion, of change measured not in seconds but in years. The boundary was not a wall, it was a transition, a soft blending like dusk becoming night without ever declaring the exact instant the sun has set. And beyond that threshold, something unexpected waited, something no one had predicted, something that would quietly reshape our understanding of where home truly ends. The instruments, tireless and attentive, continued to listen as the spacecraft moved deeper into that unfamiliar sea, and what they began to detect there would soon reveal that the darkness ahead was not as calm as it seemed. What the traveller discovered there did not announce itself with spectacle. It revealed itself slowly, the way a hidden current reveals its presence not by sight, but by the gentle pull it exerts on anything drifting through it. The instruments, quiet and tireless, began to notice that the surrounding space held more energy than anyone had expected. Not light, not flame, not anything the eye could see, but motion. Tiny particles racing through the darkness with astonishing speed, carrying with them a secret written in numbers rather than colour. If you imagine heat, you might picture warmth on your skin, or the glow of embers in a hearth. But out there, far beyond the last planets, heat takes on a different meaning. It is not something you feel, it is something you measure. The temperature recorded around the traveller rose to values that would sound impossible if spoken beside a fire on Earth. tens of thousands of degrees by the scale physicists use to describe motion at the smallest levels. And yet, the spacecraft did not warm. It did not scorch. It did not even notice, except through its instruments. This gentle paradox rests at the heart of that distant boundary. Temperature, in the language of the universe, does not always mean warmth. It means speed. When particles move quickly, we say they are hot, even if they are so sparse that they rarely touch anything at all. In the deep darkness beyond the sun's influence, those particles are spread so thinly that vast distances separate them. They race past one another like solitary travellers crossing an empty desert, each moving swiftly, yet almost never colliding. So the region can be, by measurement, incredibly hot, while remaining, in experience, perfectly cold. It is a quiet kind of fire. The traveller passed through it the way a leaf might drift through a swarm of fireflies that never quite reach it, surrounded by motion, yet untouched. The discovery puzzled those who studied the signals back home. For years they had imagined this boundary as a gentle transition, perhaps even a cool one, a place where the sun's influence faded and calm interstellar space began. Instead, the data spoke of energy, structure, and restless movement. The edge of our solar home was not a still shoreline. It was more like the meeting place of two great seas. One sea was the outward breath of the sun, that steady solar wind that had carried the spacecraft so far. The other was the subtle flow of the galaxy itself, the interstellar medium drifting between stars. Where they met, neither yielded completely. They pressed against one another, and that pressure changed everything. Motion slowed, energy shifted form, magnetic threads twisted and rejoined like strands of silk drawn together and parted again. In such places, energy can gather quietly, the way tension gathers in a drawn bow, and when it releases even silently, it leaves its mark in the speed of passing particles. Scientists considered many possibilities as they studied the signals. Perhaps the solar wind, slowing against the resistance of the galaxy, was converting its forward motion into random motion, heating the particles the way air warms when compressed. Perhaps invisible magnetic lines were snapping and reconnecting, releasing stored energy into the surrounding plasma. Perhaps the boundary itself was breathing, expanding and contracting with subtle changes in the sun's activity, sending ripples outward like distant swells on a calm sea. The truth may be a combination of all these things, layered together in a quiet complexity that no single explanation can fully describe. What mattered most was the realization that the frontier was alive. Not alive as forests or oceans are alive, but alive in the sense that it changed, shifted, responded. It was not a wall, it was not a line, it was a region, dynamic and intricate, shaped by forces older than Earth itself. The traveller had reached a place where our star and the galaxy touched, and in that contact there was motion, heat, and a delicate exchange that had gone unseen for all of human history until that moment. If you feel your thoughts slowing as you picture this distant threshold, you are following the same gentle rhythm the spacecraft has followed for decades. There is no hurry here. The universe does not rush its secrets. It lets them unfold at their own pace, like petals opening in darkness when no one watches. And still, the traveller continued, gliding deeper into that thin, energetic sea, its instruments listening, its small power source glowing faintly with the patience of aging embers. Behind it lay the sun's vast bubble, now a distant sphere it would never re-enter. Ahead stretched the open galaxy, immeasurable and calm. Somewhere within that quiet immensity, the signals it sent home began to grow a little fainter each year, not because of distance alone, but because the tiny heart that powered it was slowly, faithfully fading. The signals continue, though softer now, like a voice carried across water at dusk. Each year they arrive a little fainter, a little more delicate, as if distance itself were gently absorbing their strength. The traveller, still faithful to its path, still gliding through that thin interstellar sea, speaks with the quiet persistence it has always known, never hurried, never strained, only gradually dimming as the small inner warmth that sustains it fades grain by grain. Its power was never meant to last this long. From the beginning it lived on a slow-burning reserve, a steady glow drawn from a hidden source that changed almost imperceptibly over time. Decades ago, that glow was stronger, bright enough to run every instrument, to keep every system comfortably warm, to send its messages home with ease. But nothing in the universe is truly static. Even stone wears down, even mountains soften, even stars themselves evolve. So the traveller, like all things that endure, has entered a season of gentle decline. Engineers far away on Earth, who have spent lifetimes listening to its whispers, treat each remaining watt of power the way a lighthouse keeper might tend the last oil in a lamp. They choose carefully what must remain awake and what can be allowed to sleep. One instrument rests so another may continue. A heater is silenced so a transmitter can still speak. It is a quiet balancing act, patient and deliberate, carried out across billions of kilometres, where every decision takes nearly a day to cross the dark and another day to return with confirmation. Conversations with the traveller unfold at the pace of tides rather than voices, and still it answers. The signals it sends are almost impossibly faint by the time they reach Earth, thinner than whispers, softer than falling snow. Giant listening dishes wait for them, wide as valleys, their curved surfaces turned toward the sky like open hands. They gather those fragile traces from the darkness and translate them back into meaning, into measurements of particles and fields, into evidence that the traveller is still there, still moving, still watching the unseen currents of the galaxy. One day, perhaps not so far from now, those signals will stop, not abruptly, not dramatically, but gently, the way a candle's flame narrows before it disappears. There will be no final announcement, no farewell message. The instruments will simply fall quiet as the remaining warmth can no longer sustain their song. On Earth, the great antennas will listen at the expected hour and hear only the soft hush of the cosmos itself. Yet silence will not mean the journey has ended. Long after its voice is gone, the traveller will continue forward, carried by momentum that does not tire. There is no friction in that distant darkness, no wind, no resistance, only the vast openness of space. It will drift for thousands of years, then tens of thousands, passing far from stars that shine like scattered lanterns across the night. It will not visit them, it will only glide past as a leaf passes distant shorelines while floating down a wide and patient river. Inside it, protected beneath its outer shell, it carries a small golden record, a quiet archive of a world it once knew. Upon that disk are sounds and images gathered long ago, greetings spoken in many human voices, music shaped by many cultures, the murmur of wind and water, the rhythm of a heartbeat. It is a message without urgency, meant not for a reply but for remembrance, a way of saying that somewhere, once, there was a small blue world where curious beings looked upward and wondered what lay beyond their horizon. Perhaps no one will ever find it. The galaxy is vast beyond easy imagining, and the chances of encounter are smaller than grains of sand in an endless desert. But the record was never only for strangers among the stars, it was also for us a quiet reflection of what we chose to say about ourselves when given the chance. Not a declaration of power, but a gesture of presence. Not a shout, but a greeting carried patiently into the dark. If you picture that small machine now drifting farther each moment, you might notice how peaceful its voyage has become. No more planets to pass, no more boundaries to cross, only distance unfolding endlessly ahead. It does not hurry. It does not hesitate. It simply continues, as it has always done, guided by the same steady laws that guide tides and orbits and the turning of galaxies. And perhaps there is something comforting in that image, a reminder that even the smallest creations can travel far beyond their beginnings, that quiet persistence can outlast expectation, that a single journey begun beside an ocean on Earth can continue long after oceans themselves have changed their shores. So the traveller moves on, a faint ember in the cosmic night, carrying its memories, carrying its message, carrying the patient curiosity of the world that sent it. And as it drifts deeper into the vastness, the darkness around it does not feel empty at all, but wide and gentle, like a calm sea beneath a sky full of distant, unhurried stars. And now, as our story gently comes to rest, imagine once more that small traveller drifting in the quiet between stars. No engines burning, no sound echoing, only motion that continues because it always has. The sun it left behind, is now just another distant light among countless others, indistinguishable to any passing observer. Yet, within that fading machine remains a memory of home, a silent echo of oceans, wind, laughter, music, and the soft murmur of a world that once looked upward and wondered. There is something deeply comforting in that thought. Not dramatic, not urgent, just quietly reassuring. Because it means that curiosity, once set in motion, does not easily stop. It moves outward the way ripples move across water, widening slowly, touching places we may never see. And even when the signal finally fades, when the last whisper from that distant messenger dissolves into cosmic static, the journey itself will still be unfolding, patient as stone, steady as tide. So if your mind has begun to drift while listening, that is exactly as it should be. Stories like this are meant to be followed softly, like starlight across a calm sky. The universe will still be there when you wake, still vast, still mysterious, still waiting. With questions no one has answered yet, thank you for travelling this far into the night. And if you enjoyed this quiet voyage through the cosmos, you can gently support the journey by subscribing, liking, or sharing. So more wandering minds can drift along these paths as well. It truly helps this small signal continue outward. For now, rest easy, and good night.